Diesel fumes smell different on a trauma pad than they do at a gas station. One is ordinary, the other means someone is dying. Voss had been working the night float at Harwick Regional for 11 days straight when the smell hit her. Not through the ambulance bay doors, but through the ventilation shaft above the supply closet where she was counting sterile dressings. She stopped counting at 42. Her fingers went still on the plastic packaging. That was jet fuel, rotary engine, heavy. She told herself it was the highway. The interstate ran a quarter-mile east of the hospital, and sometimes the big rigs idled near the overpass when traffic backed up. She had told herself a lot of things in the past 2 years. She finished counting the dressings. She told herself 52, 53, 54. She told herself she was just a float nurse. She was very good at telling herself things. Her name on the hospital badge said K. Voss, RN. The K stood for Kira. Nobody at Harwick Regional called her Kira. The day shift nurses called her Float, or sometimes Hey You, or sometimes nothing at all, because float nurses are furniture. You move them where the gaps are, you don't learn their names. The charge nurse on nights was a man named Belford. He had the energy of a middle school vice principal. Not quite enough authority to be dangerous, but enough to be exhausting. He had met Kira on her first shift with a clipboard and a list of things she was not permitted to do. No central line access, no critical drip titration, no independent orders. She could do vitals, she could turn patients, she could hang pre-mixed bags, and she could stay out of the way of his core staff. We've had floats before who overstepped, Belford had told her, not unkindly, but not kindly either. I need you to understand the culture here. Understood, Kira had said. And she had meant it. She had taken the float position at Harwick, specifically because it was the kind of hospital where nothing happened. Level 3 trauma center in a mid-sized town in central Virginia, 45 minutes from the nearest military installation. She had driven through the town twice before accepting the assignment, timing the distance from the hospital to the nearest on-ramp, calculating how fast she could be gone if she needed to be. Old habit. She had a lot of old habits she was trying to retire. The supply closet was her favorite place on the floor. It smelled like cardboard and antiseptic. The fluorescent strip above the shelf buzzed at a frequency she had cataloged. 60 hertz, slightly warm, the ballast starting to go. It was deeply, mercifully boring. She had stood in this closet on 4 separate nights just to feel the boredom of it. The ordinary, human boredom of a woman counting dressings in a hospital at 3 in the morning with nowhere she needed to be, and nothing chasing her. She picked up where she had left off, 55, 56. The vibration started before the sound. It moved through the concrete floor in a low, steady pulse, not the rattle of a garbage truck, not the rumble of the HVAC kicking on. She recognized it with a part of her nervous system that apparently had not gotten the memo about retirement. Her body knew. Her body had always been faster than her brain on this particular subject. She set down the dressings. Her mouth tasted like pennies. By the time she pushed open the supply closet door, the sound had arrived, a deep rhythmic percussion that you didn't so much hear as absorb. Thump, thump, thump. It came through the exterior walls in waves that made the windows flex in their frames. She counted the intervals. Not one bird. 2, at minimum. Flying in formation close together, which meant coordinated, which meant military, which meant. The red phone at the charge desk rang. It had a specific tone, that phone. A flat, insistent double ring that everyone on the floor had been trained to treat as theoretical. It was tested quarterly. It had never, in Kira's 11 nights at Harwick Regional, actually rung for real. Belford stared at it for 3 full seconds before he picked it up. His face changed in the way faces change when the world rearranges itself around them. A kind of rapid, involuntary recalculation. Harwick Regional, this is charge. A pause. I'm sorry. Can you repeat? Your landing where? Another pause. Longer. Sir, we are a level 3. We don't have an active trauma surgical team. You need to divert to Roanoke. We can't. Whoever was on the other end of that call was not asking. The double doors at the ambulance bay exploded open. Not opened, exploded. The way doors open when someone hits them moving fast and doesn't slow down, because slowing down is a luxury they have decided they cannot afford. 4 figures came through in a formation that was not a run and not a walk, but something in between. The controlled, aggressive surge of people who have learned that chaos rewards speed and punishes hesitation. They were in full tactical gear. Plate carriers, combat shirts, helmets pushed back on their heads. 2 of them were carrying a Soak's litter between them. The others flanked it, weapons, slung but hands close, sand, actual desert sand, fine and pale, drifted off their boots onto the polished linoleum of the ear. The sound hit Kira like a physical thing. The thumping of the rotors outside, right outside now, the blades cutting the cold Virginia air 50 feet from the ambulance bay. She pressed her back against the wall near the supply closet and watched Belford drop his clipboard. Code yellow, he said, then louder. Code yellow. Clear the trauma bays. Everyone, clear the trauma bays right now. The civilian ER came apart. 2 nurses ran in opposite directions. An aide knocked over a vital signs cart. The attending physician, a compact, precise man named Dr. Aboud, came striding out of a side room, already trying to project authority he hadn't been given time to put on yet. The operators didn't slow down for any of it. The lead man was big. Not the theatrical bigness of someone who lifted weights for appearance, but the functional bigness of someone whose job periodically required him to carry another person through a doorway at speed. He shoved a mobile cart aside with one forearm and set the litter down on the open trauma bed in Bay 1 before the civilian staff had finished registering that he existed. "Stand back," he said. His voice was flat and command-specific, the kind of voice that had learned to operate without inflection because inflection costs time. "I am the attending physician," Aboud said, stepping forward, and to his credit, he did not step back when the lead operator turned to look at him. "I need to assess the patient immediately." "You need to stand back," the operator said. "I need someone specific. I know she's here. There's no she. This is an emergency department, and your man is she." He turned. His eyes moved over the ER in the way eyes move when they're looking for something they know how to find. He scanned the nurses at the station, the aide pressed against the far wall, the night tech who had come out of the lab corridor to see what the noise was. "Her license is registered to this county. Dispatch pulled it 30 minutes ago. She is in this building." Kira's heart stopped. Not metaphorically. It felt physiological, a single missed beat, a violent lurch of recognition that she felt in her back teeth. She was standing in shadow, behind the supply closet door she had pulled nearly shut behind her. Her blue scrubs were generic. Her hair was in a bun. She was, as she had carefully engineered herself to be, invisible. She looked at the man on the litter. Even from across the ER, through the gap in the door, she could read it. The sucking quality of his breathing, the way his chest rose on the left and barely moved on the right. the way his lips were going gray-blue at the edges, the way the operator holding pressure on his left shoulder kept looking up and then looking at the lead man with an expression that said, "We are running out of time. Tension pneumothorax." The air trapped in the pleural space was collapsing the lung, shifting the mediastinum, crushing the heart from the inside. It was not a complicated diagnosis. It was, however, a rapidly fatal one, and it required a specific and somewhat violent intervention that civilian R attendings could theoretically perform, but often hesitated on, because it looked brutal and required a confidence that only came from having done it before, in circumstances where hesitation meant watching someone die in front of you. She had done it 11 times in the field. She had driven 14 hours from Fort Bragg to take a float position in a Level 3 trauma center in Central Virginia, specifically to do nothing like this ever again. The lead operator turned in a slow circle in the center of the ER. "I need Arrowhead," he said. Not loud. He didn't need loud. The ER had gone quiet in the way rooms go quiet when large, armed men with dried blood on their sleeves ask for something specific. "I need Arrowhead actual, right now." The name landed on Kira's sternum like a hammer. It had been 2 years and 4 months since anyone had said that word in her direction. She had burned through 2 separate hospital systems, 3 cities, and 1 very expensive haircut, trying to put distance between herself and the person that word belonged to. She had gotten a library card. She had adopted a cat named Biscuit. She had started going to a Wednesday yoga class where the instructor played ambient ocean sounds, and no one ever asked her anything more demanding than whether she wanted to use the block. She had been so careful. She watched the operator at the litter, the one not holding pressure, the one free to be panicking, look up with the specific expression of a person watching the window close. "Gable," he said, "his O2 is at 78. We have to do something." The one called Gable looked at the civilian staff with an expression that was not contempt. Exactly. It was closer to grief. The grief of a man who knows what needs to be done and can see that the people around him don't know how to do it. "Where?" Gable said, his voice dropping into something that was no longer command flat but raw and open. "Is Arrowhead?" Her knee hurt. It always hurt in cold weather. The shrapnel they'd gotten out in 2019 had left scar tissue along the medial meniscus that tightened when the temperature dropped, and the ER was cold, and she had been standing still too long. She noticed the pain the way she noticed it every day, as information that she had filed under things that were permanent and non-negotiable. She looked at her hands. They were steady. They had always been steady at the worst moments. She had hated that about herself. Once, it seemed indecent that her hands could be so calm when everything else was catastrophic. She had come to understand it differently over time. It wasn't calm. It was a different operating system. Emergency was the mode her body had been built for and had spent years training in. The steadiness wasn't peace. It was her nervous system shifting gears. The man on the litter made a sound. It was a wet, labored sound. The sound of a lung fighting for purchase against a cavity full of air that shouldn't be there. She knew that sound from a compound outside Kandahar, and from a vehicle rollover in the Korengal, and from a rooftop in a place she was not going to think about right now. She was already moving before she had consciously decided to move. The supply closet door swung open. Her rubber-soled shoes made no sound on the linoleum. She walked past Belford, who turned to say something and then didn't. She walked past the night aide, who flattened herself against the medication cart. She walked up to the operator named Gable and stopped 2 feet in front of him. He looked down at her. She was not a small woman, but she was standing next to a man in plate armor who topped 6'3", and the geometry was what it was. She didn't explain herself. Explaining was for people with time. "Move," she said. Gable moved. Instantly, without negotiation, not because she had frightened him, but because her voice had the specific timbre of someone who was going to accomplish the task, whether or not he was in the way. He stepped to the right. His teammate shifted automatically. The space around the litter opened. Kira looked at the man on the bed. The name tape on his gear said Fenn. He was maybe 26. He had a tattoo on the left side of his neck. She caught the edge of it above the collar of his combat shirt. What looked like geometric linework. His skin was the color of old wax. His trachea was visibly displaced, pulled to the left by the pressure building on the right side of his chest. He had maybe 4 minutes, possibly less. "Belford," she said, not looking away from Fenn. 14-gauge angiocath. A chest tube tray, 36 French. Plurivac. "Get me a blade." "You are not authorized," Belford started. She turned and looked at him, just looked. Whatever he saw in her face made him stop talking, which she thought was probably the right decision for both of them. "I will explain the authorization question to hospital administration at whatever length they require," she said. "After. Get me the tray." There was a 3-second pause that felt significantly longer. Then Belford went for the supply cart, moving with the urgency of a man who had decided that someone else could sort out the liability. Aboud stepped up beside her. His voice was low. "Tension pneumo?" "Yes." "Tracheal shift." "He's lost the right lung." "Yes." "I'll take the needle if you want to." "I've got the needle." She looked at him for the first time. He was calmer than she'd expected. "You take the tube? You've done this before?" "Residency. It's been a while. It's like riding a bike." She looked back at Fenn, an extremely violent, medically specific bike. Aboud almost smiled. Under other circumstances, she thought she might have liked him. Belford arrived with the tray at a speed that suggested he had found some previously untapped sense of urgency. He set it down on the edge of the bed, his hands not quite steady, his eyes moving between the operators and the patient and Kira, with the expression of a man who was going to have a very difficult morning. She tore open the angiocath packaging. Her hands did what hands do when the training goes deep enough. They moved ahead of her conscious mind, finding the landmarks on Fenn's chest without being asked. Second intercostal space, midclavicular line. She pressed 2 fingers against the space and counted the rib. His chest wall was tighter than she expected. The pressure was higher than the displacement suggested. "Hold his shoulders," she said to the operator who wasn't Gable. He didn't ask questions. He put his hands on Fenn's shoulders. She drove the needle in. The pop was audible, a small, definitive sound like a knuckle cracking. The hiss followed immediately. A rush of trapped air escaped the catheter, and with it a fine pink mist that caught the light from the overhead fluorescence. The smell of iron was immediate and specific. Fenn's chest expanded, not dramatically, not the movie version, but perceptibly, measurably, the kind of expansion that happens when a lung that has been compressed against itself suddenly has room to exist. The monitor that one of the night nurses had gotten attached showed the O2 beginning to climb. 78, 81, 84. "It's buying him time," Kira said. "He needs the tube." Aboud was already gloved. He was pulling up the landmarks on the left. No, she caught it before he placed the blade. "Right side," she said quietly. The trachea's pulling left. The effusion is right. He adjusted without comment. The fact that he adjusted without comment told her everything she needed to know about him. She held the forceps. She watched a bowed work, her hands ready if he needed them, and he was slow, slower than field conditions allowed, slower than she would have been. But he was methodical, and in the absence of speed, methodical was the next best thing. He found the fifth intercostal space. He made the incision. She handed him the Kelly forceps when he reached for them, without looking, the way you do when you've worked with someone long enough to know the sequence, even if you've never worked with them before. He spread the tissue. He placed the tube. The blood that came through was dark and immediate. Hemothorax, too, then. Accumulated blood alongside the air, and it moved through the tube and into the pleurovac with a sound that Kira had heard often enough that it had lost its horror and become simply a sound that meant the right thing is happening. The pressure is leaving. The lung is reinflating. Fenn's O2 moved through 88, 90, 93. Heart rate stabilizing, the night nurse said from the monitor, and her voice had the slight tremor of someone who has just watched something they were not trained for and was trying very hard not to process it in real time. Kira stepped back from the bed. Her gloves were soaked to the wrist. There was blood on the front of her scrubs in a wide, spreading arc, the kind of pattern that meant it had happened fast, which was the only way it was worth having happen. She looked at Fenn. His color was still bad. He was deeply under, probably running on whatever blood volume he had left. And he was going to need a surgeon and an oar, and several units of packed red cells before anyone would be confident about him. But he was breathing. The tube was draining. The monitor was making the sounds that indicated a heart that had decided to continue performing its function. She pulled off the bloody gloves, dropped them in the red bin, looked up. Every person in the ER was looking at her. Gable was standing at the foot of the bed. His expression was the most specific thing she had seen on a human face in 2 years. Not awe, not gratitude, not the complicated mess she had expected. It was simple recognition, the expression of a man seeing something he had been looking for and finding it exactly where he knew it would be. "Arrowhead," he said, quietly. "Don't," she said. He said it anyway. "It's good to see you." She turned away from him. "Dr. Aboud." Her voice was back to being flat. "He needs trauma surgery. Amputee, left shoulder, hemorrhage controlled, but that tourniquet's been on too long. Get OR1. Get type and cross. Tell them probable hemothorax with." "I've got it," Aboud said. He was already on the phone. He was good. She noted it the way she noted things that were good. Briefly, without sentiment. The ER moved again, the civilian staff restarting around the patient like water refilling a space. The operators stepped back from the bed in the coordinated way of people who have spent a long time learning when to press and when to yield. They let the nurses take the gurney. They let the OR team, arriving at a sprint from the elevator, take the position at the head. They rolled Fenn away down the hall, the squeak of the wheels fading. The ER went quiet. Kira walked to the sink at the nurse's station. She turned the water on hot and scrubbed. The blood came off slowly, the way it always does. First red, then pink, then the faintest blush, then clear. Except you keep scrubbing anyway because your hands remember it, even after your eyes can't see it anymore. She scrubbed until her knuckles were raw. She heard Gable's footsteps behind her. She didn't turn around. "Nearest level 1 was 22 minutes out," he said. His voice was different now. The command flat was gone. What was underneath it was tired in a way she recognized from the inside. Fenn didn't have 22 minutes. You violated FAA airspace regulations and landed a military rotary aircraft in a civilian hospital parking lot, she said. We did. You bypassed a medevac chain. We did. You could have. We knew you were here. He said it simply, not as an excuse. As a fact, dispatch logged your nursing license to this county 6 weeks ago. I've been running the board since. She turned off the water. She reached for the paper towels, coarse and brown, the institutional kind that barely absorb anything, and dried her hands carefully, working between the fingers. She still didn't turn around. I'm Kira Voss, she said. I'm a float nurse at Harwick Regional. I do vitals, and I stock supply carts, and I go home at 7 a.m., and I feed my cat. I know what you've been doing. There was no judgment in his voice. You can keep doing it. I'm not here to pull you back. She turned around. Gable looked the way operators looked when they were at the back end of something long and dangerous and hadn't slept, held together by training and will, the seams starting to show at the edges. There was a cut above his right eyebrow that someone had butterflied closed. Not neatly, field conditions, and his eyes had the particular quality of someone whose adrenaline was metabolizing and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Fenn has a daughter, he said, 8 months old. He's seen her 4 times. She looked at him for a long moment. That's not fair. No, you knew I'd need a reason. You knew I'd ask, and you had that one ready. He almost smiled. The expression didn't quite finish on his face. I knew you'd do it regardless. You were already walking out of that closet before I said anything. She turned back to the sink, because she needed to not be looking at him for a moment. She looked at the drain instead, the way the last of the rinse water spiraled down, clear now, ordinary. You should know, she said, that when administration gets here in the morning, they are going to have a significant number of questions. About the helicopter, about the chain of custody on a military patient, about me, and what I'm actually licensed to do here. We'll handle the paperwork. You always say that. We always do handle it. She thought about her Wednesday yoga class. She thought about Biscuit, who would be on the left side of the bed when she got home, arranged over her pillow with the proprietorial confidence of a small animal who has realized that no one is going to stop him. She thought about the supply closet and the dressings she had been counting and the specific ordinary mercy of 60 Hertz fluorescent buzz. Gable reached into one of the pouches on his plate carrier. He pulled out something small and flat and set it on the edge of the sink without comment. A patch. Subdued, dark thread embroidery on an olive background. The shape of an arrowhead, no text. She looked at it. Fenn asked me to give that back, Gable said. He's been carrying it since Mosul. Her throat did something she did not have the bandwidth to address. Go home, Voss, Gable said. He pushed off from the doorframe. Get some sleep. You know where we are if. I know where you are, she said. That's not the same as agreeing to anything. Nobody's asking you to agree to anything. She heard him walk away. She heard faintly the exchange of radio check-ins as the operators moved toward the ambulance bay. She heard the heavy doors swing shut behind them. She heard, in the middle distance, the rotors of the Black Hawks spooling up, and then receding, that heavy rhythmic thud diminishing block by block until it faded into the Virginia night and became indistinguishable from the ordinary sounds of a quiet town. The patch was still on the sink. She did not touch it. She stood looking at it for a long time. The dried blood on the fabric stiff and dark, the embroidery underneath still clean, the arrowhead shape. She had worn that patch for 3 years on 3 different deployments, and she had put it in a box in a storage unit in Charlottesville. And she had driven away from the storage unit without looking in the rearview mirror. She left the patch where it was. She walked back out to the nurse's station. Belford was at the desk, staring at a form he was apparently not capable of filling out right now. The 2 night nurses were at the monitor station, talking in low voices. Not looking at her, but not looking away from her either. That particular kind of attention you give something when you don't know what category to put it in. She went to the supply cart outside Bay 3. She picked up the chart she'd abandoned when the helicopters arrived. Voss. Belford's voice was careful. Administration is going to. I know. She opened the chart. Room 7 needs a 2 a.m. vitals check, and someone should restock the gauze in Bay 1. He was quiet for a moment. I'm not sure what to. What just? I'm going to do room 7 now, she said. And then I'm going to finish the supply closet inventory that I was in the middle of when we got interrupted. She looked up at him briefly, not unkindly. That's what float nurses do, Belford. We plug the holes. We clean up the mess, and then we go back to what we were doing. She walked down the hall. The supply closet was exactly as she had left it. Dressings in a pile on the second shelf counted to 54. The fluorescent strip buzzing its steady 60 hertz note. The smell of cardboard and antiseptic. The glorious, merciful boredom of inventory. She picked up where she had left off. 55, 56, 57. Her hands were perfectly steady. She did not think about the patch on the sink. She thought about it anyway, the way you think about something you've decided not to think about. The whole structure of the not thinking pointing directly at the thing. The small, flat weight of it. The shape of an arrowhead in dark thread. The idea that Fenn had carried it through Mosul, which meant he had carried it through whatever came after Mosul, which meant it had traveled a very long way to end up on the edge of a sink in a mid-sized Virginia hospital where a float nurse was trying very hard to be ordinary. 61. 62. From the ambulance bay, far away now and getting farther, came the last diminishing echo of the rotors. And then silence, and then only the hum. She kept counting.